Greetings, dear ones. I'm Cryon of Magnetic Service. We're hearing the cries, literally, from so many light workers and old souls that say, I've been on my path for decades, but suddenly I feel stuck. I feel stuck. Why? What's going on? We love you so much. You are dearly loved. I'm going to give you the answer, and dear ones, you're not stuck. But the perception of being stuck is real. I'd like to explain a little more. And the explanation is one that I've been giving for quite a while for some of the same kinds of frustrations and questions, but especially for those of you who are watching this and relating to that particular thing, that particular question of being stuck. We have to go back again to what your perception is about your life when you were not stuck. And that would be a past time when things were moving a certain way, so that perception of being stuck was not there. In fact, things were going well enough that you felt that there was a moving forward, you might say, of what you were doing and in your life and the things that you're teaching, or perhaps the things you believe, or just life in itself, a path that was making sense. I want to remind you of something we have discussed before. And this is that a past energy, even if it was a few years ago, let's just say 7, maybe even 5, that particular energy was different than today. It's not just the energy that is different. Let's just call it the reality of life. So it's not even esoteric. It's how things work back then, 7, 8 years ago, or however it is that you're comparing to what is today. And the feeling of being stuck today, or different today, or not moving forward today like you did before. This path that you claim to be frustrated about is something that has its own kind of energy. You expect certain things when you walk forward. You expect certain kinds of realities. When your life goes, you might say, from A to B, or even as you pass the passage of time and you look backwards and you're satisfied perhaps, or that you are indeed doing something, or there is progress. What if I told you the truth about this, that the reality, the landscape of where you walk has changed? It's a perception, not being stuck. It really truly is a perception that you're not feeling the same as you did before. And you're correct. You're not. I would love to say yet again that you're looking at a landscape that is starting to change dimensionality. And yet that doesn't work for so many of you who say, well, what does that mean? Sometimes it's some kind of a catch-all word for things are different. There's more here than meets the eye. You have moved to a slightly higher consciousness in order to even ask that question. First of all, I'm dealing with human beings, old souls, who are used to progress. And it might be spiritual progress. You're pleased with the way you've directed your life and all of these things, and suddenly it doesn't feel like that. It doesn't feel the same. It feels stuck. It feels stuck. It feels like you're not moving forward anymore, and yet you did before. The perception is caused from all of this change that you're seeing. Let me ask you, 10 years ago or so, do you remember that there was a war between consciousness? There is now. Have you seen it? Where consciousness really, truly is different than it was. Where you're having to step lightly when you talk about certain kinds of things or do certain kinds of things, because there's a great deal of the population that wouldn't like it. Now that is fairly new, isn't it? There are many things that are different that would then target the fact that times are different. So the reason it feels like you're stuck, dear ones, is that times are different. Landscape, where you walk, path, all of those things have changed. So you cannot simply be what you were and come to a place where you are and expect the same kind of energies of where you were. Surely it makes sense to you that the light that is starting to be shown on this planet, that actually is starting to also show the dirt, changes things. When those around you can start seeing themselves or others around them in a different way because the light is turned on and they're seeing everything, that changes you. You are shifting. Therefore, the things that you expect that were in the old energy are not here. I'll make the statement. You should hear this and understand this. To us, those from the other side of the veil, those who are the angelic pieces and parts of those around you, those who love you on the other side of the veil, the pieces of God in you that are active and are starting to work. How do we see you? We see you as, you ready? Not stuck. It's a perception. Now, some of you will object and say, no, I'm stuck. The things that used to work are not working. I'm pushing against things that are no longer working. They're pushing back now. Didn't I just tell you that? Why do you expect the same feelings you got when the world was different? Are you doing the same things you did then or new things? Maybe that should be looked at. Why don't you change a little bit of what you do? We have given you the elements of mastery. We've talked about compassionate action. We've told you what is going on this planet right now. You cannot continue to do the same things you've done for decades and simply have the same then reaction today. You're not stuck. Dear ones, if you're using compassion of any kind to work through your life on your path, you are spreading a light. Maybe you're not getting the same reaction. May I give you an exercise? And it's the one that I often come to. It's an exercise in communication. And it's simple. Question: do you believe in the angelic realm around you? Yes or no? Now, those who would watch this kind of message are often very much on board with the idea that there are energies, there's beauty around you that you don't see, that you might even see guides and helpers. They're always there. We've told you they are. They're often waiting for you to make a change before that kicks in. And what happens? They're often waiting for you to give an allowance for new things that you don't even know are there. Did you know that? Listen to this. Why not drop into your heart just for a moment and say, Dear Spirit, I'm frustrated. I feel stuck. Dear Spirit, show me that I'm not stuck. Give me the assurance and then actually the perception of what may be going on my path. Now that's a fair prayer. It's a very, very good one because it starts to strengthen the idea that when you are in a crossroads or you're not understanding something, you can ask for an allowance to understand it. Have you thought of that before? Dear Spirit, I'm in a new landscape, and I'm trying to do the old things that are not working. Show me some of the things to change. I will give allowance for these changes and become unstuck. How about that? Unsticking yourself might be a whole lot easier than you think. That's why we love you the way we do. We have to go back in time just a little bit to discuss this energy that you are in. I've told you many, many years ago to expect a time that was this time. It was going to be the shift, and it was going to be a time when light started to come on the planet in such a way that darkness would show. That basically was the message. There's going to be a time, a shift, in a certain number of years that corresponded to that which is the precession of the equinoxes that had been predicted and targeted for change. But the biggest attribute of this shift, this change for all of you, would be that more light would start coming to this planet. That's a metaphor for an awakening consciousness. But the metaphor is that the light would then spotlight all of the dirt that you never saw before. That's a metaphor for seeing all of the ugly consciousness that has been here, that has been part of your lives. Many of them, all your past lives, have been accomplished and lived and expressed in a very old energy. Almost all of you, dear ones, who would watch this program and understand that you have past lives on this planet, almost all of you have been part of wars, because that's what humans do. And you know I'm right. One stops, another one starts. One stops, another one starts. It's almost like a never-ending old energy paradigm. And I told you to look forward to that paradigm crumbling, and it's beginning to. What else have you seen that is disturbing, especially this year? Have you seen anything that didn't make sense? Difficulties? Have you had issues you never thought you would have? Are there abundance changes? Is there a consciousness shift that surprised you with those you knew or thought you knew? This is spotlighting the dirt. Have you seen any greed, perhaps, that surprised you in any places? Maybe it didn't surprise you, but at least you got to see it. That is what I said would take place. Now, the old soul sees the shift as a time of light. That's what we said. So the old soul would anticipate, perhaps, that this would be a time of awakening. It is. And that which we call ascension. Ascension has been described as an awakening so much that your very consciousness starts to become multidimensional, that you start being aware of things that you weren't before. Your intuition starts to become very sharp and very good, so good that you can count on intuition. That is an awakening light worker. That's a high consciousness that's developing in many on this planet right now. But the dark that is the old consciousness, it is there as well, is it not? But we also told you something else to look forward. When things are the same and have remained the same, especially in an older, darker consciousness on this planet, when that happens and you have any kind of a shift or change after hundreds of years, if not more, of the same kinds of expectations, the same kinds of things that have happened over and over and over that would even create wars, when that starts to shift and change, it affects everyone. But mostly an older consciousness, when it starts to see the light being turned on, will fight. It'll scratch. It'll scream. It'll push back in ways it never did before. That's why that question is here. How could you have ascension at the same time you have burnout? That's what it feels like. Because the old soul who starts to awaken in a higher way is also now aware of the pushback of the dark, the pushback of an old energy. We're not talking about evil spirits. We're not talking about entities coming in from hell or any of the other mythological things that you see in the movies. We're talking about dark and light consciousness. We're talking about that which has been the planet for years and years, up against what is coming in at a greater level. Integrity, honesty, the desire for peace, the desire for compassion instead of reaction, kindness, even among politicians. I know some of you say that's an oxymoron. Can't happen. That's what you're starting to see. You can understand, can you not, that those things that I just mentioned to you would be frightening to those who have always had the secrets of greed, what they've been taking for so long. Not just leadership, dear ones. We're talking about regular human beings on the paths that were created for them in an old energy, doing what they always had in an old energy. Lack of caring. All of that gossip and talking about others. That's old energy. That's a dark energy, dear ones, if you hadn't figured that out yet. Where you take others to task just because you don't like them, because maybe they have something you don't. This is the way the planet has been for so long, until we and you come together to create light on this planet like it has never seen before. You are just beginning this battle. This has been a difficult year. It doesn't mean next year will also be, dear ones, because things are happening in the field that you don't know about yet, that are going to be a little sweeter, I would tell you that, a little different, I will tell you that. You might say this was the year of learning, even though that's not the message that I gave, that this year was about. But for many of you, it has been difficult, very difficult. And that's because this reality that you call normal, how things work for you, is starting to change. What would happen if many of the human beings on this planet actually started moving into the reality of another dimension? Now, this is a subject that is not able to be discussed in a few minutes. What is dimensionality? We have had that discussion before. What does it mean for any humanity on this planet to move slightly into another dimension? Well, the first thing that happens is they don't disappear, dear ones. It's an added dimension to the ones you already have. So they have perhaps a little more awareness. There's more light on their path to see to go left or right. There is more awareness of the dark things on the planet. Some of you are reeling in disbelief when you start to discover what has always been there. So that question about what really is happening, burnout, some of you feel that is what you're facing. Ascension, that is also happening. You might say burnout and ascension are happening at the identical same time. I want you to know the difference because it's light work. That's why they call you a light worker. The battle is here. I told you it was coming. But it doesn't necessarily have to be like this from now on. Better things are coming, dear ones. And I want you to understand the difference. Ascension is filled with love. Ascension attitude, ascension consciousness is much, much different than burnout. It's something that you will say, oh, now I know, I recognize. When things start to shift, you will know them, and you will know that which is different from burnout. Now, those who would be watching this right now, you're not all healers. You don't all have spiritual gifts, but many do. Many have some that are small and that are only for them. They're not for others. But you know they've left too, or they feel like they've left. Something is happening that would cause that perception that what you had that was beautiful, spiritual, that you counted on has gone. If indeed you are a healer and you count on these gifts to make your living perhaps, or even to feel like you're contributing to the planet, you're probably aware that they've diminished as well. So, number one, that perception is totally and completely accurate. Did they diminish? Perhaps in your mind's eye of what you expect, they have. However, they have not. In fact, they have grown. They have increased in their efficiency. Dear ones, they're stronger now than they ever have been before, all of them, not just a few. In a universal way, you might say, you are far greater today than you were before all of this shift started. So what's up? Why do they feel like they've gone away? All of this fits in to the teaching that we've been giving you for the last 2 years. And there are several attributes of that teaching. And the one we would point to first is dimensional shift. The second one that we would point to is the lifting of the veil. Now, those are related, and we have discussed both of them before. If you have just tuned into this, or you've never heard this before, instead of referring you to find out, I'm going to tell you yet again. And it's something that is beautiful to tell you. You have changed the reality of the planet. You have. All of you together as light workers. Part of the assembling together for listening to perhaps even this message is part of that change. Dimensionality on this planet has shifted. Now, for you to know what that means, we'll say reality, or what you got used to when you grew up and all these past years, has started to shift. You feel it, don't you? I know you do, because there are so many who are asking about it. Why does it feel different? What is the difference? And why is it uncomfortable? So we have discussed that, and the answers are, you are changing the actual reality. Now, if you go back to a previous message that we've given you, many years ago actually, it's that the old energy seems to run in a circle. It repeats itself over and over. And this old energy is what you're used to repeating itself. So as you work with it, you become better at it, within it, and it starts to change. It's upsetting. But that indeed was what the message was those years ago, that history will not repeat itself. Instead, you're on a new siding, you might say, if you're on a train track. So instead of the train running in a circle, that siding has scooted you off in a direction you've never been before, which is the future, which is not to circle and circle and have it repeat and repeat. And that particular track you're on represents a new kind of reality. That's why you're feeling what you feel. Now, dimensionality, that's something that changes you might say, the perception of what is real and what is not, but it also does something else. It changes the reactions from what you do and what you receive. So in the past, when you were pushing on A and got B, today you push on A and you get not B, but who knows? You haven't recognized it yet, and that is also change. I am actually answering your questions, dear ones. It may not seem like it. And the other thing we have talked about is the thinning of the veil. Now, the veil is inside you. And when the veil starts to thin, the more things start to then appear, you might say, or be able to be used that are spiritual. Here's where we say your gifts are increasing. And you might say, well, I'm not aware of it. That's because you've never had them before. There are things that are being given to you and being actually, the hand has reached out, take this, and because you're not really aware of this dimensional shift and you're afraid of the change, you're not even seeing that. I have the answers for you. And they're beautiful answers. You are a light worker. Your name is known by Spirit. The Creator knows your name. And you have worked so long with these spiritual gifts, they would not be removed from you. Don't let anybody tell you that this new era we're moving into is dark and that your spiritual gifts will not work anymore and therefore you ought to fold your tent. That is right from a darker consciousness that does not want light here. Doesn't want you here showing your light. It wants to cancel all the lighthouses that might show the way in this new track and instead keep you like you were. I've told you that as well. The metaphor that we always use and we used last month, it's like you receive what you receive in these spiritual gifts from a transmitter somewhere. Call it the transmitter from the sky. Whatever you want to that sounds right and is linear. And you tune into that transmitter in order then to accomplish the healings or the enhanced meditations or the channeling or the writing. And that's what you miss because the transmitter has changed frequencies. Now, I give you this example because almost all of you know or remember that when you receive something from the air, in fact, if it's a transmission, whether it's radio or television or shortwave or anything, you have to be on the right frequency. You won't receive anything if you dial in the wrong frequency, nothing. And if you're on the edge of the correct frequency, you'll find that there's a little bit, but it's not what you used to have. Now, what happens if you now come into the center of that new frequency, which is being broadcast differently? Differently because you are in another dimension, differently because the veil has started to move and lift and thin, and all of these things are in your favor, but what you see is fear because you're not aware to tune in to the new frequency. I am speaking right now to many who are just now having the aha experience. What if everything is still there and more is coming and I'm not aware of it? Brian, how do we get to the new frequency? Okay. This new frequency was built for you. In fact, it's easier to tune into than the old one was. So if you really want to tune into the new one, the answer is so obvious, it is so perfect, it's so easy, and it's not one you consider. I want you to get used to problem solving and having solutions in your life in a way you never did before. It's beautiful. And it goes like this. Direct communication from you to the Creator. Absolutely direct. Dear Spirit, I am looking for the new frequency. Show me what I must do. Help me to be completely and totally peaceful with this change so that I can move not in fear or anxiety, but in compassion. Show me where that new frequency is. Show me where that light is. And let me, at that time, find the pure center where the new stuff is. Help me to find the new center of that frequency where everything I had comes back full and more. Everyone who is a healer here will find that their powers of healing and understanding and observation are increased. Everyone who wishes to channel here or has been here, who feels there's been a little bit of difference, it all can return. The answer always has been direct communication. Something you haven't really been taught. This is the difference. It's not in courses, it's not in books, it's not through somebody else. It is you, dear Spirit, show me where it is. I am ready to go. And the purity of it will be for you. That's the answer. It hasn't gone anywhere. It's still there. This is why I'm so in love with humanity. I'm so in love with humanity. For you are able and willing to start the shift and the change and learn new things, dear ones. That's who you are. This is very similar to a question that we answered some weeks ago, when the question was, how can I retain hope in a world that is dark? The answer is slightly different, but it truly remains the same metaphor that we have used over and over, and the information that we have about this time. I cannot say it enough to you, dear ones, but I can put it in different parameters, perhaps, or different metaphors for you to see it more clearly. The first thing I would say is, who are you really? Who do you think you are? What is your soul blueprint? And how does that affect you? I'm assuming those who watch this are awakened enough to know you're not here on this planet to suffer. I'm assuming that the people who watch this, those sweet souls, the old souls who are tuned in right now, know who they are. And they're struggling between knowing who they are and holding a high vibration in a world that seemingly has a low one, that is very dark. I go to that metaphor yet again that reminds you of something that you may not have been told. When you arrive on this planet, all of you, especially the old soul, has been through the school of past lives, who has a much more mature idea of why they're here and the light in general that is being spread on this planet. I'm talking to you. What is it you've been told of who you are? So I will remind you, you come into this planet absolutely complete. And what I mean by that is there is ascension attributes in you right now. They're all there. In you right now is the ability of mastery. You come in with this. So the next question will say, well, where is it? The attributes of the devolution of consciousness on this planet has covered it up with low consciousness that you were born into. You assume the same level of consciousness that humanity does when you come into the planet and live a few years. You're right there with them. No matter how evolved you are, dear ones, when you arrive, quite often you are reduced to the consciousness of the rest of humanity. And you live your life that way. So let me get this straight, Klein. You're telling me that we already have it? Yes, you do. You really do. You're not waiting for a gift from God. Now, you've all been taught you are. In fact, the consensus on the planet, if you follow spiritual systems, is that you were born dirty. You are not worthy, and you can't do anything without help, especially spiritually. There are so many systems that tell you cannot contact God directly. You have to go through somebody else, and then be careful because you may have too much darkness within you called sin to be heard. So that has to be taken care of first. How can you get ahead when you have that kind of programming from the beginning? So let's change the program. Let's reframe everything with truth. Here is the truth. You have God inside. You do. You are a creature of the Creator, known by the Creator, loved by the Creator, and you've been born magnificent. Inside you are all the attributes of ascension and truth and light that the Masters had. It's all being covered right now by that which is the low consciousness of the planet. The struggle, therefore, is to get rid of what's covering it. To start peeling that onion that covers your majesty. What a visualization. And so that's the first thing we ask you to try or do. Every single day, every single morning. Dear Spirit, thank you that I have joy and I have peace. It's inside. Help me to strip away what doesn't belong in me in order to find that, to have that show. Dear Spirit, I'm grateful for these things. You can talk to yourselves or the cells in your body or even the angels around you in gratitude. Do you awaken in a safe place? Do you have things to eat? Many don't. Do you have the gratitude going for you as well? These are the attributes that create a peaceful, compassionate soul, you might say, on the planet. You already have this. But every time you get up in the morning, you would say that there is an energy which beats you up. It's an energy perhaps of frustration or worry or what is going to happen today or what's next. It is hard to find any kind of a high vibration when you have that. It truly is. And so you fall back on what you know works. What do you know about the energy of consciousness? And here's what I want to remind you. It has many names. But the thing that is the most significant is this one. What you think about has an energy of creation with it. What you think about, you bring to yourself. So often you can see this. It really shows with those who only think about negative things. Oh, I'm afraid of this, I'm afraid of that, I think this will happen. And then you watch their lives, and it does. And you wonder, what is it that brings about all of these crazy negative things? What are you talking about lately? What do you confide in to your friends? Do you confide worry to them? Are you concerned about a situation? Let me tell you, you are a broadcasting tower of energy. And if you're going to raise that tower and hook up the power of energy of consciousness and then broadcast what you're worried about, guess what happens next? Here it comes. All the things that you have broadcast that you're worried about are lining up to be manifested. That's how powerful you are. This is true. Some call it the law of attraction. It really, truly is more than that. It's much more than that. It's the energy of the planet that listens to the old soul. It's really a neutral energy that is ready to manifest whatever that God self says. And that's you, that piece of God on the planet that starts broadcasting that which you believe is going to happen to you. What if you broadcast the opposite? I am magnificent. I attract good things. And you start saying that and you expect good things. Now, right away, you may have negative things attracted to you because it takes a while to change the energy around you, especially if you've been broadcasting negative things for some time. Now, there are old souls that say, wait a minute, that's not me. I don't broadcast things. I don't talk. I don't gossip. I don't do any of these things. I am of high vibration. Yeah, but what are you thinking about? What are you thinking about? And then you'll go, well, I'm concerned. Yes, you are. I'm concerned that what's going to happen next might affect me on the planet. I'm concerned about this and that and this person and my family. Your broadcasting thoughts were almost as powerful as speaking it out loud. You're going to have to reframe your thinking. I see good things for my children, and even those I worried about in the past, I see resolution. Dear Spirit, I see good things happening in my life. Where I walk, there is light. What kind of affirmations and sayings can you make up for yourself that you can say on a regular basis? Because when your body starts to hear what you're saying, your consciousness starts to go with it. That's how you stay in a high vibration, no matter how dark the earth is. You stand above it, above the clouds, above the storm. You raise yourself far above that, and you look at the sun and say, I'm so glad I'm above these clouds, because I can see the sun. I know it is safe here where I am because I am magnificent. Can you do that? And there will be those who say, don't I have to do some exercises or perhaps there are some other things that are necessary? And the answer is no, it's you with you. Some find this difficult because they've never done it. And that's when I want to tell you these things are doable for everyone. And you don't have to ask permission. And remember, you're not praying for a gift. You're not asking God to give you something you don't already have. Again, it goes like this. Dear Spirit, help me to clear what doesn't belong in my magnificence and get rid of it. Slowly help me to polish the diamond that I am and show my light. And in the process, show me some of the habits perhaps that are negative so I can realize them and not do them anymore. That's how the individual stays above the fray. Not only do you deserve it, you have it. You are an engine of light. And if you're an old soul, you've been here many, many times. You know how to do this. You have a maturity of light. You know how this is done. Don't be fooled by the darkness that wants to pull you away from who you really are. Yes, the earth is going through a battle of dark and light. You are a light soldier. Don't let them define you as darkness or as anything but what you really are. Don't let the dark, you would say, consciousness of this planet invade that truth that you know. You can stand tall. Coming is super consciousness. You're almost like a superhero of consciousness on this planet at this moment in time. Believe me, you are here on purpose. I would like to speak to you, dear ones, because there are so many light workers right now who are literally awakening to something I'll call the soul blueprint. There are so many things to tell you that are outside of the three-dimensional ideas you might have. Indeed, of what happens with a soul blueprint, or some of you call contracts. You're starting to feel perhaps you're here for something different than you're doing, or perhaps above that which you're doing. Not to replace what you're doing, perhaps, but a greater purpose in your life. That is so common that so many are asking this same question. How do I start? Is it true? Am I here for something bigger? Well, the first thing I would say to you is, why would this occur to you at all at this point in time? Why so many of you? Perhaps you didn't know that this is a very common question today among those who are starting to awaken to a larger truth, or perhaps those in the shift that we are going through right now that are also awakening to something bigger than it was. In other words, you may have been a light worker for many, many years, but suddenly you're asking this question. You wouldn't be an old soul, dear ones, if you didn't ask this. So many of you are here looking at a future that you didn't actually think would be here. Remember, you were taught by so many that by the years in the 2000s, it would be the end of the world. There would be all kinds of catastrophes that didn't happen, by the way, and expected that are going to happen in the next couple of years that probably will not happen either. This has been the rhetoric. This has been the thing that has perhaps disconnected many from wondering, what is the rest of time on this planet going to be, especially for you? Is there something you're supposed to do? Let me answer it this way. Absolutely. Absolutely there is. We have to look into this in a way perhaps that is different from you felt, that what you felt was there. In a linear fashion, that is to say, in an older energy, you look at contracts, which, by the way, really don't exist in esoterics, in metaphysics. Contracts do not exist in your soul. Now, this may be news for you, because there are so many who say, I have this contract to do this or that, to the extent that something better may come along, and you'll go, no, that's not my contract, and you will stay then on that course that you thought was what you're supposed to do. And here's what you didn't realize. There are no contracts. Instead, there are, get ready for this, changing potentials with the release of greater truth in your DNA. Changing potentials with the release of greater truth from your DNA. Have you heard me talk about what is in your DNA in the form of time capsules? That means energies that only release at certain times, or that only release when you have gotten to a certain frequency of consciousness, a higher consciousness, that, for instance, you may have never known about or never felt or never sensed until this time called the shift, until perhaps you awaken to a little greater truth. Or, this gets weird, perhaps you've moved into a slightly different dimensionality. Now, we have talked about that before. All of these things are occurring with old souls and light workers who are now having all of these questions starting to pop up where they did not before. There are no contracts, dear ones. It is such a beautiful system. Let's study this even a little more. Humans have free choice. All of you have free choice. When to awaken, what to do when you do, to follow the intuitions that you have, to meet those synchronistically that may change your life. And all of these things are free choice. Spirit does not know what you're going to do. Spirit knows what's in the field. Spirit knows the potentials you have. Spirit knows what's going to happen if you follow certain potentials. So it's not fortune telling. Again, we equate it to the snowball rolling down the hill. If it starts rolling down the hill, you know it's going to continue and gather speed and size and perhaps go to a certain place as it rolls down. This is the same kind of thing we see with a human being. Look who he or she has met, and look what's going to happen now. Look where the future might take them based upon the potentials they both have together. And that doesn't necessarily mean a romantic thing. It could be a business partner. It could be a group. It can be so many different things that you decide to do in an awakened state. Do you see how that might change things? Then that becomes the blueprint. That becomes the future that you have then started your own snowball. It's not a contract. But believe me, you came in with the potential. And that's the beauty, because that's what you're feeling. So you're asking yourself yet again, I feel something in me. I'm supposed to do this or that, or I'm supposed to do something. I have no idea what it is, but I feel a calling, some have said, a calling. Where do I begin? Great question. Now the next part of this answer, where do I begin? Almost all of you have been trained and programmed through a linear way, perhaps of learning and being, where almost everything is a list. And then there's the hierarchy of the list that says in order to do A or B or C, you've got to do something first. And then you will study this or that, or this will happen. And so you have this grand hierarchical list of what happens when you begin a certain thing. Esoterics are not that way. Multidimensionality is not that way. It's not even close to being that way. And this is where some have a misunderstanding of what to do next. How do I start to know my calling? And I'm going to give you the answer. And it's the one that you don't want to hear necessarily, because it's not empirical. That is to say, it's not a thing that, grab your pencil, write this down. It won't be that at all. Here's what I say, and I tell everyone who asks the same thing. If you posture your life in joy, and you awaken to a greater truth, you understand that you can have the compassion of the Spirit, of the Source. When you get to that place where you start to be comfortable with yourself, to the point where you can say, I love my life. I love the way I think because I am a piece of God. When you start to get to that place, when you can wake up without anxiety and be in joy no matter what is happening in your life, when you start to feel this way, those answers of what is next will start occurring in your life, and they will occur by themselves. Through intuition, through enhanced intuition, through having an intuition that says go left instead of right because there's somebody you're going to meet there. Now, it may not feel like that. It just may feel like I've got to go do this. And when you go do that, there will be somebody else you meet to take you someplace else, or a situation that you will be aware of that you were not before. So let me back up and summarize it again. These are not stair steps to climb for you to find out who you are, what you're supposed to do, or what your calling is. This is you relaxing into the love that is there for you to such a degree that synchronicity can happen and intuition will occur. That's the answer. Probably don't like that, because there's no one or two things, grab your pencil, as I say. Instead, we're giving you instructions for life, for mastery. Drop into your heart and start living that which we have told you to before. And when you get to that comfortable, safe place every day, and you know who you are, all manner of things start to open up, believe me. This has been the way of it for so many old souls and light workers, and they can testify over and over that the elusive things in life suddenly started appearing when they relaxed with themselves, loved themselves, and knew who they were. It's an odd situation, is it not, to be more aware of a greater truth and yet not be able to truly share it. I want to give you a little story Another parable of woe. Now, woe could be a man or a woman. It doesn't matter the gender. He's a woe man. And we have said this before. These are metaphors for a greater truth, these stories that I give you. We find woe on another planet, in another culture. And in this story, that is only a story, an allegory, the entire civilization is sightless. Now, you might feel sorry for a civilization that is sightless, but they're doing just fine. They were born that way. They were always that way. And just like you see in your culture, for instance, a sightless blind piano player who is all over the keys and knows where they all are and plays better than one who has sight, you understand how a sightless person can use the other senses of touch and feel and smell in order to get around. So there was no problem at all. This sightless civilization was doing just fine. And woe then meets somehow a shaman. And the shaman seeks out woe and says, how would you like to have a gift, woe? A gift that is an extra perception from all those around you. And of course, woe said, I think I would like that. Can you tell me about it? And the Shah woman said this. It's a perception that is going to allow you to see what is in front of you at a difference. See is a different word for you. And it means that you can sense things that you can't touch or you can't even smell. You can actually sense them at a distance. You can see a road in front of you. Seeing meaning perceive this, that goes to a place where you could turn left or right, and you would know by sensing this which does what. You can see what's at the left. You could see what's on the right. The seeing is a new perception. If the civilization was sightless from birth, it wouldn't understand vision. It wouldn't understand the word seeing. So that had to be explained as well. And woe said, yes, I think I'd like that. So woe reported to this shaman, and said, okay, let's go. And through a series of ceremony, woe received this gift of sight. And it wasn't that was a great sight, it was just marginal, but all of a sudden, woe could see light. He could see things in front of him. And it was astonishing to be able to, what he says, I can now tell the future. I can sense what's in front of me. I know there's a road there, and I know it goes there, and I can start telling my friends and my family. They will use me as a guide, I'm sure of it. And so he went back to his family and his friends, and slowly they realized he had extrasensory perception, the sense of vision, of sight. And he said, I'm standing here ready to help you. I can show you what is going to be right in front of you. You cannot perceive yet because you can't feel it or smell it or touch it. And I can then perceive it. It's called vision. You might even call it a greater truth, that I can see what you cannot. And I am ready to help. And of course, the next thing that happened was predictable. They cast woe aside. And they said, you are crazy. In fact, some of us, we think you're just a little evil. It doesn't matter how many tricks you try to pull here. What you have isn't viable. You're nuts. Woe went away in great sorrow, realizing that this greater truth was being wasted on those who did not want to see it, who didn't think that it was possible to have. And he had to then do something. And what woe finally did was to keep that sight a secret. And through the years, as he met others and they met him, it was only the ones that asked or wanted to know a little more that woe would then start to share that maybe, just maybe, he had a grander truth. And he would share it with those who wanted to see it. And all of the others, he just kept quiet and used his sight to help those without them even knowing it. That's the end of the story of woe. Most of you know where this goes. Most of you understand this parable. There are so many of you right now who have a bigger truth. The advice remains the same on this beautiful gift giving, and that is to make use of it in a way that is loving, that is kind. Make use of it so those around you would not think you are that crazy person, perhaps that they know in the family. But perhaps you are, but not fully, because you're also a loving, kind person. That's the way it's done, dear ones. Whatever truth you have that may be beyond what others have, temper it with love. Make it compassionate and love those around you. That is the answer. I'm crying in love with humanity. And so it is.